from Western North Carolina's news leader. This is News 13 at 11.
Right now at 11, a big day in court. Sentences handed down in a county corruption scandal.
The 5 co-defendants will all spend time in prison. We're moments away from live team coverage as the community reacts to their punishment.
But first, we have our eyes on the tropics. The new track of Hurricane Dorian dropping right now.
The storm ripped through St. John and the U.S. Virgin Islands. Heavy rain and strong winds slamming the islands. The hurricane now headed for Florida. And tonight, Florida has declared a state of emergency ahead of the storm.
And we begin tonight with Chief Meteorologist Jason Boyer. And Jason, still uncertainty about where Dorian makes landfall.
Absolutely, but we do think it's the southeast coast that is the bullseye at this point, and that shouldn't change too much, if any. The tropical satellite, a healthy hurricane at this point. We can see the brighter reds and oranges wrapping around the center of circulation as it pulls away from Puerto Rico. The biggest change with the top of the hour advisory is now up to 85 miles per hour maximum sustained winds. It's still a Category 1, but it has strengthened since the earlier afternoon. And this is a radar out of San Juan. You can see the center of circulation right here and bright bands of strong thunderstorm activity wrapping into it. It has a favorable environment to strengthen, and that is just what it's likely to do as it comes towards the Bahamas into the weekend. The Bahamas right in here, so there will be some impacts in the northern islands most likely. Category 3 possibly before making landfall somewhere along the Atlantic coast of Florida. Could be as far south as Miami, could be as far north as Jacksonville with a cone of uncertainty. Now the latest trend is there's a little bit of a jog to the north, and that is going to be key to our forecast. Watch the wind speeds, the strongest winds right here in the pinks and purples, and that is coming over the Bahamas and eventually headed towards the Florida coast. West Palm at this point with the European model is bullseye for a landfall sometime into late Sunday, early Monday. We'll watch that play out. But the idea is that we could have some impacts. I'll show you why coming up in just a bit.
We're told to evacuate, do it.
Millions in Florida are preparing for Dorian's impact. The message from state officials is to take this storm seriously. The governor is urging all residents on the east coast of Florida to prepare. Many there are stocking up on water and gas.
You can keep tabs on Dorian and other tropical weather by using our hurricane tracker. You can find that tool in the weather section of WLOS.com.
Now, some major developments in the Buncombe County federal corruption case.
Today, a judge sentenced former county manager Wanda Green and 4 others in a kickback scheme.
It was blatant. It was willful disregard.
All of the sentences combined, we're talking 14 and a half years in prison and fines that total $160,000.
And I think it sends an important message.
Tonight, the community's reacting to the punishments handed down.
We begin with former county manager Wanda Green. The judge sentenced her to 7 years, calling her the architect of a culture of corruption.
About half the courtroom was full as Green learned her fate. News 13 Stephanie Sanastasi shows us why the people inside said they came to watch.
In a pink shirt and black blazer, Wanda Green walks up the steps and into the federal courthouse in Buncombe County, her attorneys by her side. In the courtroom, Green admitted guilt to 4 charges. Those include misusing county credit cards to benefit her family, to illegal whole life insurance policies, tax fraud, and a kickback bribery scheme for luxury trips.
Working there for 30 years and knowing what I made yearly, and then they'd get by with all that they did, and it just wasn't fair.
Pam Stroop's a former county employee. She sat in the courtroom for one reason.
I wanted to, at least if they saw me, kind of maybe, that might give them some kind of remorse, but I don't think so.
After hearing her former boss sentenced to 7 years in prison plus a $100,000 fine, Stroop says it wasn't enough.
Lenient. It was too lenient.
Others who sat in the courtroom felt the same way.
She deserved a whole lot more.
Citing her age, cancer treatment, and remorse, Green's attorney argued for a lesser sentence. But Judge Robert Conrad said although he's sympathetic of her medical problems, he believed what she did was a horrific abuse of office. Stroop agreed.
Because I think just somebody in their position should have had more respect for the community, their employees, especially those that worked 30 years.
Those who knew Green and worked for her say they'll never forget what she and her partners in crime did.
I think they knew what they were doing.
In Buncombe County, Stephanie Sanastasi, News 13.
4 others were sentenced today. Former business intelligence manager Michael Green was sentenced to 6 months in prison. He was also ordered to pay a $5,000 fine.
Next, former Assistant County Manager John Creighton. He got 1.5 years in prison for his involvement in a bribery deal. He must pay a $25,000 fine.
Former County Manager Mandy Stone will spend 2.5 years in prison. She was ordered to pay a $15,000 fine.
Next, former county contractor Joseph Wiseman. He was sentenced to more than 3 years in prison and ordered to pay a $15,000 fine.
While most of the 5 defendants received either the maximum or near the maximum sentence, some may eventually have their sentences reduced. Today, John Creighton received a significant reduction in time that he'll serve because of his cooperation with the federal investigators.
The U.S. Attorney's Office also left the door open to request reductions in Joe Weissman and Wanda Green's sentence. That can happen if information they've provided investigators leads to future indictments.
Days leading up to the sentencing, several Buncombe County taxpayers wrote letters to Judge Robert Conrad.
Many asking him to sentence Green and her 4 accomplices to the fullest extent. News 13's Taylor Young caught up with those willing to go on camera tonight. What did they have to say, Taylor?
Well, yeah, some were really pleased with today's outcome, but others were hoping for a harsher punishment.
I asked him to be fair but strict.
Deborah Compton watching Wanda Green walk out of federal court this afternoon.
Reporting live outside the federal courthouse.
Minutes after learning her sentence. It's a moment the former Buncombe County employee who was laid off in 2001 after 15 years of service has been waiting for years.
I can't help but be very angry.
That anger eased slightly, knowing Green is set to spend 7 years in prison.
At least it wasn't 4 years. I'm very angry about that.
7 years, my gut reaction is 7 years looks good.
John Brigham.
I've been following, yeah.
Relieved, hoping today's sentencing will set a precedent.
You're not punishing Wanda per se. You're telling other people about what will happen if they do what she did.
The sentence that was handed down today for 7 years is a very serious sentence.
7 months after County Commission Chairman Brownie Newman was elected, evidence of Green's illegal activity surfaced. Years later, he's hoping her punishment will deter others from attempting to do the same.
And I think it sends an important message that this kind of violation of public trust is taken seriously.
A violation Deborah Compton says has impacted the community's trust.
The fact that they were stealing money and defrauding county taxpayers, which I am one of those also, was extremely difficult for me to stomach.
And the county says additional oversight requirements have been put in place to prevent taxpayer money from being misused like this again in the future. Live in Asheville, Taylor Young, News 13.
The county is also considering another civil suit against Green.
It would be for misuse of funds tied to the Tryon Equestrian Center.
We have continuing coverage of the county corruption scandal on our website, WLOS.com. That's where you can find an in-depth look at the federal case, which started almost 2 years ago. You will also find the charges, pleas, sentencing, and federal guidelines for each of the 5 defendants.